is a weekly rundown with you folks. Same format as we've had in the past. We'll have about a 10 or so minute briefing here. Today's briefing will be on education, and then after that we'll take probably 15 or so minutes worth of questions about that subject or any others that you folks want to dig into. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Jim Libby. He is our Republican lead on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. Yep.
Thank you, Trey. I'm Jim Libby, and I represent Senate District 22, which is part of Oxford, Cumberland, and York County. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about education policy here. I want to tell you a little bit about myself first. There's not much I haven't done in education. I've had a superintendent certification. I've been a college dean. I'm a college professor now at Colby and at Thomas. I was on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee when we created the Maine Learning Results. And I feel like I've pretty much seen it all. And I think that education, the state of education in Maine, hasn't been in this poor condition in quite some time. And we need to take some action. It's as simple as that. So I really like what the Republicans are putting forward here in terms of making, at least proposing change. And let's start with competition. We need competition. Schools need competition. Competition creates efficiencies. It fosters innovation. It's something that is part and parcel of our economy, and it just plain works. So I'd like to see some competition, and so would the rest of my Senate colleagues in the Republican caucus. We look at things like lower standardized test scores, and we are really concerned. Think about this for a minute. Standardized test scores in Maine have decreased faster than the national average for 4th grade and 8th grade English and math. That should be startling to Maine citizens, and it is. Parents are concerned. And that's according to the nation's report card. So the report is available. You can look at it. You'll see exactly how at one point we were above the national average, and in the last several years we've just had declines that are just very concerning. Hokesby in 2003 did a study that's often referenced, and he looked at school reform in areas where there was choice. And so in a study in Milwaukee, they looked at charter schools in Michigan and in Arizona, and what they found was that productivity was boosted in public schools when school choice was available and the money followed the student. And I just think that's a good scientific study to refer to. There are many others. It's a fact in Maine that a child's zip code is responsible for where they attend school. So if you're in a failing school in an SAD or an RSU, and their scores are even far below the mean averages, you're stuck there. Unless, of course, you live in a town that has school choice. That doesn't make sense at all. I mean, so think about for a moment, we've got towns like, I remember thinking myself, I've got 2 children, one's in a private school, one's in a public school. I remember thinking myself, I should move to Arundel, or I should move to Acton. I should move someplace where, the money will actually follow my child. That's not the case, and at some other time I certainly can talk to you about the amount of money that I spend on private school for my daughter. My son's in public school. He's an honor student, 4.06, very proud of him. So we've got both. And we've also had, in my particular school system, a lot of controversies at Bonnie Eagle High School, particularly regarding content. So school choice is a significant public policy statement that we're making here. The bill that we are purporting to support is patterned after the new Arizona law. Arizona school choice has come in 3 different levels, starting in 2011. But essentially what Arizona citizens can do is they can establish a non-taxable savings account for schools, and they can receive 90% of their per pupil amount to go toward any school that they want to choose. Now think about that for a minute. How valuable that would be to a student that's in a school that has failing marks, and where a district is within even 20 miles, and they can afford to transport their student to that district. Think about what kind of an opportunity that presents. And the competition for the students. We know right now that if a student wants to transfer from one district to another, 2 superintendents are involved. You've got to have their signature. And the sending superintendent sometimes does not sign. And so that's a situation that has to be addressed. It has to be addressed now, but it's been going on forever. And so that's not the kind of system that we'd like to see here, and it just doesn't provide the kind of leadership that we want to provide. And there are other things that I think are regarding the Arizona law that are really appealing. One is that they have an overall fund established that incentivizes companies to donate to the fund because they have a dollar for dollar tax credit. So that's, and there are many other principles behind it. Some businesses are already offering as a benefit to employees matching. So there's a lot of things that go along with that. But basically the money follows the student. The variation won't be, the variation in performance won't be dictated by the zip code. And we could eliminate this unfair situation where some students in Maine already have school choice and some students don't. I know a lot of parents have talked to me about, and basically bragged and said, well, I live in this town, we can send our child anywhere. And that's concerning to me because, you know, there are some districts that have socioeconomic difficulties that are certainly greater than other districts, and they do affect the learning environment. And so if you get a situation like that, you want to do something about it. And we have been slow to do something about that in the state of Maine. So I'm going to turn it over now to Senator Kine, my colleague, and she's going to talk a little bit about transparency. Senator?
Cut down just a little bit, it feels like it's in my face. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Senator Lisa Kime, and I represent Northern Oxford and Northern Franklin County. And I think we all recognize across the state that parents have been showing up to school board meetings in droves. They want to know, they're concerned, they want to know what the content of their child's education is, and they want to be included. And I feel that as they've been reaching out to me, that parents as a whole feel cast aside, that their values and their perspectives and even their aspirations for their child's education is really not consequential to the decision-making process. Republicans are proposing bills that respect and restore the parents' fundamental rights over the education and the upbringing of their children. Maine statutes must be made more clear on this topic. A child's parents should have the final say over the education opportunities and the content of a child's education, not the Department of Ed. The state and its Department of Education needs an adjustment in perspective. We all recognize that it takes a team to educate a child. The Department of Education and our local schools, and especially our teachers, are valued and irreplaceable members of that team. But the CEO of the team and the person that needs to be in the driver's seat is the parent. Maine's system of education should empower students and parents to make the best choices for themselves and for their family. And we have several bills in that deal specifically with just transparency and accountability. And that's something I think you've heard the Senate Republicans say a lot. but schools need to know that the parents are in control. And honestly, the school boards are looking for that guidance from the state to just say, here, make this available for the parents, be transparent to the parents, and be their partner. And so that is some of the bills that I wanted to highlight today. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm State Senator Matt Pouliot. I represent Senate District 15. And for a number of years, I served on the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee here in the legislature, but now I'm tasked with trying to address Maine's housing crisis. And I think that these two issues really go well together. When you look at the fact that not every student is really made to go to a 4-year baccalaureate, we then also need to make sure that the programs are in place to support those students through their educational journey. Right now, Maine is really falling short. In fact, the Central Maine Community College does have a building trades program, but sadly only 1.8% of the student population is enrolled in that building trade program. So you see some bills coming forward to address the housing crisis, yet we only have the ability to create about 40 to 50 million new value of homes in this state with the current construction workforce that we have. And so Senate Republicans to that end are laser focused on career and technical education training to ensure that Maine's workforce needs are aligned with those needs that we have in our community, namely housing, which affects all of us, no matter what side of the political spectrum that you're on. And so this session, you'll see a number of pieces of legislation coming forward from us, which are going to be focused on career and technical education and workforce training that is aligned with the needs of the state of Maine, to make sure that the some 49,000 jobs that are out there that are unfilled are able to be filled because we have the workforce that's actually trained to fill them. And that's all I have on that topic.
All right, so you heard it pretty succinctly today. The Senate Republicans here in Maine are focused on 3 different things. That making sure that the zip code doesn't predetermine a child's future and their educational opportunities, making sure that we're empowering parents, and making sure that we are aligning with our workforce, what our needs are here across the state, and making sure that children in Maine are able to get the education that they'll need to actually go out and get a job and participate in that workforce in a meaningful way. So happy to open up the questions at this point. And yep, go ahead.
Regarding school choice, I know you guys said the zip code shouldn't matter, how kids get education. Why are there some districts in Maine that have school choice and some that don't? And is that something you guys want to work on?
Sure. Jim, if you want to go ahead. Yep.
Sure. Some districts have not signed on with a high school. That's just the way that we do it. And so they might have an elementary school in the town, but then have the option to send the student to a number of districts in the area. And it's been that way for as long as I was in the 1990s, I was in the legislature on the education committee. It was the same thing. So, we see that as just, it's part and parcel of the problem. So I'm glad you asked the question.
Is it, is it like
Sure.
smaller towns, like I'm thinking at Finley and BCM, like if they can go to Bangor or no, is that where we see it more often?
Yeah, I think it's variable. Some towns are a little bit larger. I mentioned Arundel. My wife used to teach in Acton. That's a smaller town in my district, but compared to the north, it's not so small. It varies. But there really is no reason why we should use geography as a mini monopoly. Why would we draw lines and prevent students from crossing lines? It's some kind of a protective measure that some people consider protective, but protective of what? Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how much funding
Sure.
would follow the student to a school of their choice.
Yeah.
Would it be enough to cover a tuition in a private school? If not,
No.
how does that? Okay, so how does this proposal not decimate public schools for people who will ultimately still need to be in them? The very low income people.
Yeah.
The building stays the same. You still need
Yeah.
teachers, and they're getting less money.
Yeah, because you could go to another public school, for example, or you could go to, there are also, there's all kinds of different options for education in the state. There's not just public versus private. You got, Maine School of Science and Mathematics, for example. If you're in the top 20% of your class, you can go up there. And And the cost of that is far less than, so I send my daughter to Berwick Academy. Over the 4 years, I'll be spending more than $100,000. I'm on 75 now. I was talking to my caucus about that this morning. Not everybody can do that, I realize. And this is, it's too late for me, right? But if you got the per pupil or 90% of the per pupil, you'd be talking about $7,000 or $8,000 a year that would go toward educating a student in a different area. If they were going to another public school, it would be a straight trade. So, and there are some public schools that are excelling in Maine.
But if I lived in like Pownell and I want my son or daughter to go to Cape Elizabeth, how do they get there? If I don't have a lot of money, if I'm at the poverty line, how do they get there?
My father or mother works in Portland, and they drop them off. I know in my case, there's a bus that comes up to Scarborough at Cabela's and buses my daughter to South Berwick. I mean, and I think that there could be some options that would develop like that, but until we get to the point where we're even looking about, we can't even look at transportation before we convince the other people in this building that we need school choice. We need competition, and we need a way to improve, and of course I already quoted one of the scientific studies. There are others that show that competition will improve both the public and the private schools.
One of the
Thanks for
criticisms
asking, by the way. Thank you for asking.
one of the criticisms we hear about school choice is that when you allow parents to take their student from one school that's not as good and move it to a school that's better, that kind of along the lines of what Randy was saying, that's not, you're not necessarily investing in the school that's failing. Therefore, that school continues to fail. And isn't it better to invest in schools that are failing to bring them up?
That's not the way I see it, because if you're all of a sudden not receiving as much in per pupil, you better bring up the level of the content and make it competitive so that people want to come to your school. That's the way competition works. It doesn't go in the opposite direction. And otherwise you're going to close. So it's really important, I think, to introduce this whole idea of competition into the schools. And you know what? 80 to 90% of students are going to stay in their school anyway, and they're going to do exactly what you're advocating or you're asking about. They're going to do everything that they can to make sure that their school is excelling. And again, it's not just standardized testing that we should be concerned about. It's the amount of extracurriculars that are available in one school versus another. When I was on the education committee back in the 90s and today, right, it always bothered me to look at the differences between schools. There even here in Maine, between these school districts, there are the haves and the have-nots. We've got some schools that have beautiful, for example, artificial turf fields and a brand new gymnasium. And we've got schools that are using gyms that are 50 years old for their varsity teams. And we just have to take a different approach to this system that we're in. And now's the time too, because you see it rolling out. So it's not just Arizona. Iowa just adopted the exact same competitive methodology, and I think they expect good results. Thank you so much for asking the
We
question.
have about 5 minutes left, folks, so any other questions?
What happens to schools that are failing? And, if there is school choice and kids are able to go to, better schools, what happens to those schools in those districts?
I think the Department of Education has a role. I mean, they need to go in and they need to examine why are these schools failing? Why are they not meeting? Remember, I was on the committee when we made the Maine learning results, when we created them. Why are they not meeting the learning results? That's an assessment process that the DOE and, of course, the local district is involved in. And so, I mean, it's something that has to have a local genesis. Nevertheless, there's a role for the DOE. It's a great question.
Question for Senator Dunn.
Sure. I kind of want to jump in on that too, if I could just for a moment. Like one of my local towns, Hanover, has school choice. And that's a major selling point for people that want, are selling their homes in that area, or realtors who say, hey, you get to choose because you can send your kid to Gould. Now, it isn't that you get the full tuition of Gould. but that extra chunk helps, and sometimes a family that's just on the cusp of maybe being able to afford it, that changes that for them. And when you think about the questions you're asking, say if your child is locked into a school that does not have the opportunities for them for the next 4 years, but by having your child there and therefore the money associated with your child, this school will hopefully get better. Well, that actually doesn't matter to your child, right? Because your child is then locked into that place for the next 4 years. And it isn't always necessarily that one school is better than another school. Sometimes it's just simply that they offer something that your individual child needs. And so we should allow parents and the students to be making these choices, because it's about what fits you better, not necessarily what's better overall. So I don't think we have to worry that the schools are gonna, make these, ideas that, all the schools are gonna close and we're gonna be pulling kids out of all these schools. No, it's gonna be a matter of parents being able to say, what's the best fit for my child? And I think, and we need to flip the questions that we're asking to say, what's best for this child in this moment, at this time, not how do we save the education system, right? How do we get our children well educated? So I just wanted to jump in on that, because it's a big issue around, a few towns in my district as well.
On the transparency and school boards, educational curriculum content. Obviously, one of the things we hear from the department and from school boards is that school boards already are locally controlled, and that parents already have input into curriculum, that's not dictated by the state. How would your bills address that? How would you try to change if school boards already have that local control? How would your bills enhance that?
Yeah, thank you. I absolutely love Maine's system of local control, and I don't want to change that at all. But I would like to require that school boards have transparency in the educational materials that they're offering. So what textbooks are they using? What is the syllabi look like? What books are they asking the students to read? There should be really an accessible way for parents to have oversight. What books are in the library? They should have that easily accessible for themselves, so that they can say, okay, I approve of this, or I don't approve of this. And also an opt-out, right? If there's curricula there that parents don't agree with, that they don't want their child to be subject to, then they can say, nope, I'm opting out of this. But transparency is key to that, because we live in a busy world. We need to make sure that it's easy for parents to have that information and be able to, quickly just say, okay, this I like, this I don't, and, work with their teachers, work with their local school board. Right now it's difficult for them to know what's actually being used for textbooks and type of curriculum.
Can you give just an example of how that would be done, like that kind of level of transparency we're talking about? Teachers have to distribute lists of books that are being used. How do parents learn that what's in the library?
Absolutely. I think adding it to the school website, just, adding a list of, here's the books in our library. This, that's on the school website. Here's the, for, English, 9th grade English, here's the books that they're recommending. Here's the recommended list. Here's the extra list. Put all of that up on a website so parents can just see that ahead of time. I think that's easier than printing something out and sending it home with your kids. It just makes it available for everyone to see.
I think, to jump in here too, I think a big missing component in all of this is what is a good standard for some of these local districts to use. Folks that are on school boards, they want to help, they want to do the right thing, but they may not necessarily know what that looks like or what a good model would be, and they also don't want to get in trouble either. So if we can come up with some sort of guidance for them to use as well that they could then adopt easily at the local level, I think you go a long way into ensuring that transparency is naturally baked back into the process.
I'd love to hear your thoughts and Lisa's thoughts about the new leadership at the state party level. Demi was voted out. You have a new chair, a new vice chair. Can you talk about those results and what direction you hope they take the party?
Sure. So Lisa was actually our caucus delegate on that head of the committee, the state party committee. So I'll definitely let her jump in here. But I'm encouraged that former Representative Stekis has highlighted the fact that we need to put more emphasis on Maine on our legislative candidates. And that's something that, to me and my caucus, we're really excited about, the opportunity to work with him, to continue working with him, because he's just coming out of the legislature in a leadership role and now pivoting into a new one. So I think the opportunities abound for what we can do now going forward as a party, and in particular on the legislative front, to have more of a symbiotic relationship there between what's happening at the party and what's happening here in the legislative branch of government. I think it's nothing but positive news for Republicans. So, Lisa, feel free to jump in.
I really don't have much more to add. There was, I think, a good shift in leadership there with, at least the energy there was really good around Joel Stetkes stepping in, and he has, reached out to us, obviously when he was in the House. He reaches out to work with us in the Senate, but that's also his goal, I think, as well, is to really keep more unity in how we're working together. So I'm looking forward to that.
There were more moderate factions of the Republican Party who were concerned that the GOP platform was kind of moving in a more too extreme direction in terms of, some of the anti-transgender and things like that. And there was a desire to actually go in and address certain planks in the platform like that. Do you believe that the GOP platform is heading in the correct direction, or do you think a course correction is needed to come back towards the middle to try to find some more independent voters to join you guys?
We didn't actually have a discussion about the platform that day at all. It was only the vote on leadership, and I think the discussion on platform is one that probably I should do a deeper dive on before I answer questions on that. There's really, I think everyone has an opinion. And really what we've done here is set up what we want our platform to be, and as legislators, we're very in touch with the people in our districts. So what you see coming out from us here is very much what we believe the heart of the people is. And so that would be the best answer I would have for platform, is basically what we're giving you every week on Tuesday.
Can I say something?
Yeah, jump in, Matt, and then I'll close it out.
I think,
Yeah.
as somebody who's been and had a background in education policy here, I think the one takeaway that I've had, just being candid as a legislator, is that the system that we have in place in no way ensures equity for all Maine students. We can't unequivocally say that it does, and there's no data to support that. And so what Republicans are about is ensuring equity and equitable access to high quality education for all Maine students. And we want to get down a path to doing that. Now, you can't keep doing the same thing that you've done and expect it to be different. I mean, that's the definition of insanity. So we're not suggesting that we throw out the whole system that we have. We're just saying we need to improve it and make it better. So hopefully that's the type of tone that the story will be told in, because the reality is that we can't keep doing what we've done and expect to have different results for Maine students. And those are the ones that are being left behind in this discussion.
I'm just going to jump back real quick to Randy, your question about the platform. That's a totally different process than the one for selecting the chair, and it's one that'll actually, we'll have our own representative and seat at that table, as well as the House Republicans. I have no idea what shape that's going to take at this point. That didn't become a big sticking point in that conversation for us. So we'll keep you updated as things continue to develop there, and ultimately we'll get one vote on that subcommittee, and so looking forward to seeing how that all shakes out. So with that, we'll wrap up for the week, and again, appreciate all the good questions and feedback from you folks this week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 12:30. Thanks.